we're thrilled that you joined us for our premiere show.
Yeah.
And you're welcome. You are absolutely welcome to stick around as we move to something that's sort of a great segue from what you were talking about, because this is about the absolute elimination of due process, an absolute, end run around the Constitution, and really something that is precipitating the constitutional crisis that
I can hang out, sure.
has been gunning for. So, by all means, stick around for this next topic. And Lisa, I'm going to send it your way. This is the Kilmer versus the United States.
It's Kilmer and us versus the Trump administration. Thank you so much, Nadine. And I really want to talk about this because it is really an outrageous thing that's happening, and it's more than outrageous. It's extra constitutional, not in a good way, not super constitutional, but counter constitutional. The Constitution, expressly says, this is my Constitution I carry with me at all times. It says that no person shall be denied, deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. And this is a fundamental violation of due process of law. And that Constitution says persons, not just citizens. And here we have a situation where someone who was actually under an order by an immigration judge to be protected from removal was kidnapped and stolen away from his family in Maryland, his wife and his young child and the children that he's helping to raise, and taken to this horrible, inhumane center in El Salvador. I'm not going to call it a prison because I think it's far beyond a prison. I was looking up the details of this CECOT, this place that he's been taken. It's designed to hold 150 people in a room, where each person has 6 square feet of space. And 6 square feet of space, I was measuring it because it's actually smaller than my desk. It's 3 feet by 2 feet. And, when I see that description of the amount of space a person has, it's not just that that's the amount of space a person has in this 150 person prison cell. There's 2 bathrooms, 2 toilets, 2 sinks. There's metal, what they're describing as beds, but they're really shelves, up, 4 up the sky, basically, with no blankets, no pillows, no mattresses. It's 24-hour day artificial light. It's no access to an attorney to make a call to the person you love, or to even talk to a congressman or a senator who comes to the country to try to find out if you're okay. No access to human rights observers or the like, but access to people like Kristi Noem, who goes there for sort of prison pornography photos of herself with human wallpaper of these prisoners behind her. Just really morally grotesque behavior by someone who we already know is morally repugnant. In her own autobiography memoir, bragging about the murder of a puppy. So this is someone who has sociopathic, psychopathic practices that she's admitted to, and then she goes to celebrate this prison at a time when this sort of torturous prison, at a time when the United States government is facing court orders to return someone who was taken without due process of law, who they have no evidence was involved in gang activity. They have, in fact, a court order to the contrary, saying that he cannot be removed to El Salvador. And when you look at the so-called evidence they have, it's a corrupt police officer relying on his own fake, or sort of judgment, supposedly, but he's been demoted since then. And he is claiming that this man is a member of this gang because he wears, he's a fan of the Chicago Bulls. He had a hat for the Chicago Bulls. It is just the most outrageous notion that they could just declare someone a terrorist and remove them without any process of law. And then you've seen in this most recent, sorry, I'm on a rant now, but you've seen in this most recent appearance by the dictator of El Salvador. He was elected, but he describes himself as this popular dictator. Bukele, who came to the White House and had the fawning of Trump and Vance and company over him, where Trump basically said within the hearing range of the mic that he wants to send, quote, homegrowns, American citizens, to this hellhole without process. And then the Trump administration claims it has, quote, no power to get him back, despite a unanimous order of the Supreme Court, no power to get him back, even though we're paying Bukele to hold him and to hold these people. It's our tax dollars. He could in an instant ask for him back. He refuses, but he didn't refuse to get those rapey guys, the sex traffickers in Romania, returned.
Right. Andrew Tate and his brother.
And the Tate guys who were accused of human trafficking, of sex slavery, immediately got that government to return them to our shores, these predators, accused predators to our shores. And so some people have been saying, oh, now we're in a constitutional crisis. Well, we've been in a constitutional crisis since John Roberts intervened to keep Donald Trump out of jail last summer. But we are in another phase of this constitutional crisis because we now have open defiance of an order of a unanimous Supreme Court. That court order was particular to due process, to being able to have due process. I think the court was wrong to suggest that this Enemy Aliens Act was ever intended, or by its language applies to a gang. It's by its term applies to countries we're at war with, and we're not at war with Venezuela. And you can't actually be at war with a gang. It's not a sovereign state. So that should have never been allowed to proceed. But they did agree that at a minimum, there needed to be due process. And that's too much for this corrupt and immoral administration. So I don't know if either of you have thoughts on that, but those are some of my thoughts I thought I'd share on this segment of our 5, 8 and a half.
No, it's absolutely chilling. It's absolutely chilling. And I think people who, they often start with those who are considered the most vulnerable and, will have the fewest people stand up. But once they sharpen that sword, it's coming for everybody's neck. And yes, the hot mic picked up Trump saying, we're going to need a whole lot more. I think he maybe even said specifically 5 more of these installations for American citizens. And this is a line that once crossed is the thing that will accelerate capitulation if we do not get as vocal and as visible as possible in pushing back. Noliwe, what were you gonna?
It's hard to know what resistance to this looks like, right? In a way, I mean, saying no or what, but you're seeing people. What I was actually thinking, I was just talking to my students today who there's a kind of directive on campus. It's not a rule, but kind of directive that if you are traveling, if you're getting on an airplane, not even internationally, you should maybe let the university know that you're traveling, because things are moving quickly, things are escalating. And there's directions to always have ID, whoever you are, citizen. And it feels gross. That very scholarly term, gross. It feels gross, as we were talking in class today, to be making these distinctions between, even if you're a citizen, right? You should have something identifiable, and not just identifiable, but something that says your citizenship is the U.S. And so we were pulling out driver's licenses to see, does it actually identify your country of citizenship? Or should we be carrying around passports? Should we have, you're talking about papers, right? And producing acceptable papers on demand, and then hoping that they don't disappear, hoping that they're not torn up, hoping that before you're shipped to a out of the country, that someone will acknowledge your citizenship. And again, what's gross about it is we should care whoever is being challenged. Due process doesn't just apply to U.S. citizens. The whole idea, the whole structure of the law is being trampled here, but we're caught between how are we, as again, this is just us talking today, like what is a decent response, and what do I need to do to stay safe? And that's real. At the same time that you want to resist, that you want to tell the immigration person, no, you don't get to take me, or give me back my ID, or take your head. We know what happens when you resist the police. Some of us well know what happens, what kinds of protections are or aren't there for you but before this presidency, when you resist the police. Between that, though, and if you don't resist and assert your citizenship, you really may end up in a very scary place without access to due process, without access to a phone call, where your organization or institution needs you to let them know you're traveling because you can disappear. It's a real moment. It's not even a moment. I don't have language for the precarity. It feels like it's very precarious. And I've heard women, this is the last thing I'll say, I've heard some women who are worried, women in particular were worried because a lot of these videos that we're seeing of ICE agents, when we get the little cell phone videos of them accosting people, they're not always wearing anything identifiable. They're just like dudes dressed in black who are walking along the street and all of a sudden are slapping restraints on them. And I'm sure a lot of people that I've talked to, women who are particularly terrified by this, because how do you know who has jumped out of the van and is accosting you? How do you know it's not a serial killer? But we are in this moment where you have to submit. And it's just worrisome.
No, it
really.
really.
When Lisa pulled out her Constitution, of course, I thought of Mary McLeod Bethune talking about how membership in the organization requires you to read the Constitution and understand backwards and forwards what your rights are. Just to add, I think, to these kidnappings, they are selling ICE windbreakers that look very official. It's one of the most popular things that is being sold. So when these guys jump out without any sense of needing to identify themselves and snatch people up off the street, I think we have to resist in all the ways available and look out for each other. We've got little red cards that we keep near the door, but the intention is to make sure people know their rights, because once they get you out of the space where the public can even track what is happening to you, it gets scarier really quickly. So I think this is one of those moments where we all have to understand we have an obligation to collectively use our power to videotape, to capture, to call these people out, to post their pictures, because these people, they belong to communities, they belong to families, they are somewhere in this world, and there needs to be accountability for the kind of dystopian world that they're trying to create around us.